So, I mean, right now there's a lot of headlines in the news all around real estate. And one of them that I wanted to talk with you about here today was in regards to the antitrust suit that went out, in which the National Association of Realtors just settled on. And there's talks of compensation changes, and there's a lot of information out there, but a lot of misinformation out there. So I wanted, if you could, Melissa, let's give the consumers a background on what is happening with realtor compensation, how it may or may not affect consumers, and then let's start dispelling some of the fake news that's out there with it.
With respect to the antitrust lawsuit from 2019, there's been all this ink spilled about it's fundamentally unfair for the sellers to pay the commissions for both the listing brokerage, which is the seller, and the buyer's agent, which is, of course, the buyer's agent brokerage, despite the fact that we've been doing that since like the beginning of time.
Yeah.
Right? You bought your first house, I bought my first house. This is what happens. Buyers were typically represented, but did not have to pay any compensation to their representative. So they got the benefit of all that expertise without having to pay for it, because that's just the way we did it. So fast forward, we have a result from the courts, which was the end of 2023, and it identified that they found in favor that it is unfair that the sellers are the only ones to pay for it. Now, again, Emilio, if you listen to the news, they make it sound like there's no real estate agents anymore. Like, we're not going to have realtors. That is just completely erroneous.
Yeah.
What it really says is that there is now going to be an opportunity to negotiate and shop the way that you're going to essentially pay a real estate agent to list your house, or as a buyer's agent to represent you in the purchase of your house.
Mhm.
But it does create a very different dynamic, which we've been dealing with now for 6 months at least. Some communities and jurisdictions made this pivot years ago, where
Mhm.
now buyer's agents are essentially going to be compensated by the buyers directly, because there has been some expectation that sellers maybe aren't going to always offer compensation to the
Mhm.
buyer's agents.
This is the part that I think is confusing the public, is that real estate commissions have always been negotiable.
Absolutely. Always and forever. But, I think it's one of those one bad apple spoils the bunch. You hear everybody talking about, oh, well, it's going to be X%. So now they just assume, well, that's what everybody has to pay. But that's, as you know, being in the industry, is not the case. I'm sure you've negotiated commissions in various structures.
Well, absolutely. I mean, depending on the level of service that a listing needs, and depending on how much the market is going to react in a positive way to the listing or not, is all going to depend on what you would offer for buyer compensation to entice realtors to bring their buyers into into the marketplace, into that listing. But what I'm seeing, and the sad part is that the news is selling sensationalism. The news is selling fear, and they're confusing consumers, because consumers are not going to be saving money with this. This is not what's going to happen. What's going to happen is consumers are going to be spending more money. And I can break that down. People may say, yeah, no way. Yes way. Because most of our sellers, okay, I would say about 85% of my clients, who are maybe 90% of my clients who are selling, Melissa, are also buying. When they are buying, they now have to cough up the percentage for the real estate buyer's representative if they want a buyer rep. And if they
Right.
don't want to be represented and they want to go right to the listing agent, then they don't have anybody that's negotiating for them, guiding them through the transaction, making sure inspections are well and safe. So there's no real win there. It's like going into the courtroom without an attorney.
Well, and that's one big caveat point to even put forth, is that this settlement that you had mentioned hasn't even been accepted by the court yet. So everything that we're talking about, the fact that the Wall Street Journal and everybody else is running with this, they entered in the terms of what the proposed settlement would be on Friday. And now all of a sudden, everybody's treating it as if it's gospel. It's not even been approved yet, Emilio, which is why we're not sure when those changes are going to be taking place, most likely starting in July, assuming that the court approves it. But I just want to make sure that consumers know that, because again, if you don't no, you hear it. It sounds like, oh yeah, agents are obsolete. You know, consumers are going to save money.